Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome to my shop. Today I'm working with Rob Cosman, who made this absolutely gorgeous Purpleheart project dovetail saw. And I'm going to be making the case with carving, and it's just, I love this one, but one of you are going to get the chance to own this. So let's dive in and make the case for this saw. I know what this is. This is a box. Not just any box. A Cosman box. And not just any Cosman box. This is a Cosman dovetail. Blah, 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 blah. Not just a Cosman dovetail, but a Cosman Purpleheart dovetail. Oh, that is pretty. Yes, that is right, a Rob Cosman saw, and this is a one-of-a-kind Purpleheart project saw. So he made this with his own two hands, and we're going to have fun today because I'm going to be making the case to hold this, and then we're going to auction it off for charity. So for those of you who don't know, Rob Cosman has a charity called the Purpleheart Project, and that's why this is a purple handle. Now this is actually resin and dye-infused maple. So it's not Purpleheart. This will stay this purple for its life. It won't slowly fade to a brown like normal Purpleheart would, but this is really, really gorgeous. Very beautifully done. And if you want to find out more about the Purpleheart Project, hop over to Rob's channel. He has a video actually showing him making this exact saw. And at the end of this video, we're going to be auctioning away this and the box that I'm making to go to the charity. So if you want to find out more about that, there's information down in the description, and you can put a bid in the auction on the saw. I'll leave a link to that down below. But first, let's get into making a box for this gorgeous thing. So a couple things I want to do. Number one, I want an octagonal box. I don't want something simple. I want something that has three sides on the end, but long. So it'll be around the same size as this cardboard box. I'm thinking about doing something or carving around the outside, but I'm also thinking about how to make it hinge. Do I go with a hinge like the one that Cosman uses? Be kind of cool because it's his saw. Or do I get some really nice brass to put in there? Or do I do something else? Or do I have to do a lid that slides on, slides off rather than hinging? There are a lot of different ideas that I can come up with this, and I don't know where to go. So I normally start over my box and see what lumber do I have, what do I want to pull out of, and then see if there's anything else I want to get. Part of me is saying do it in Purpleheart, and then I'm thinking, yeah, the Purpleheart's just going to turn brown, and there's enough purple in this. If I do a glass top, you can see that. So I got to think through this. Usually when I need to start designing a project, I head over to my wood pile, and I've got a lot of wood to look through. Some quarter sawn white oak, some maple. Oh, that's actually an 18-inch wide white oak board. And I've got just about everything in here, the leftover offcuts from projects over the years and things I can't quite get rid of. One of these days I'm actually going to go through and clean out the stock and make someone happy and give away a bunch of scraps. But there's a lot of things in here, and each one of them has its own characteristic, and a knot in a different place, or the wood grain in a different place. And it's just kind of fun to fit through and find out, what would this do at a box like that? I end up going with quarter sawn white oak. Yeah, I know, kind of surprising, but that's what I'm going to use for the main body of it. So I need to figure out how big is the box. I'm going to come over here and measure. I want it to be octagonal, so it needs to be a little longer than it would normally look like, so there's some space for it. So I'm just kind of playing around with, it's going to generally be about this long, making sure I can get that out of the lumber. So I'm looking at this and thinking, you know, if I were to resaw this down in half, that would make perfect box sides. Plus then I'd be able to get a grain match that would run all the way around the board. So I would have a perfect grain running all the way around from every corner. Unfortunately, this has a bit of sapwood on the edge, and so I want to clean it up. I want to keep just a hair of the sapwood there. I like that transition from the really light into the dark. And one of the nice things about white oak is you can actually use that. It's actually really stable and good stuff, especially in quarter sawn like this. So I'm going to get myself a nice and true edge and joint it up, and then this will allow me to then cut out the board I want. I'm going to start making it a little larger than I need. I'm guessing I'm going to need about 2.5 inches, so I'm going to mark down 3 inches and then rip that down. I can do it in the saw vise, the saw bench, or I can do it vertical in the bench. And it's kind of one of these things that I like doing it both ways. Each one has its own characteristic, whether I rip in the saw bench or in the vise. And I often find for boards that are 3 foot or less, I prefer doing it in the vise. And if they're longer than that, then I prefer to take them over to the saw bench. Now we need to resaw this down. So it's about 3 inches wide, and I could use my handsaw, but it was a little bit on the dull side, and I found that out from cutting it to width, that I just figured, nah, let's get out the Roubo for install. And this is a crazy fun tool to use. And once you get going on this, it will do a beautiful, beautiful cut. So you're going to cut at an angle, and then you cut down for a while, flip the board over, and cut from the other side. That way you're always looking on the side you're doing the cutting on until it pops through. And if you've gotten it well, you've got a good line all the way around it, and you've got a nice, good flat surface. But we still need to plane things down. And yes, it's good to use your third hand. If there's any bend in the board, you can use your head to hold it in place. It actually works out pretty well. Now I need to know how wide is the box going to be, and so we can take some measurements off the saw that way, and we can start actually laying out the octagon shape. It's going to have 2 long sides, and then it's going to have 6 sides that are all the same length. So I need to find out how big actually are those. We have these pieces that are about the right size, and so I need to start laying that out. And so I'm going to play with it and figure it out and think, yeah, it's about this size. And if I make it a little bit larger than it needs to be, and I can always bring it back to what it should be. We need to have a groove running in this because we need a bottom to the box, so I want to make sure that it'll fit in. For the bottom, I'm going to use this piece of 1/4-inch poplar that I have, and it will fit into a groove running around the box. So once we get the groove in there, we can make sure that it does indeed fit the bottom of the box nice and snugly, and wrap that in there. I actually left it a little bit tight because I want to make sure that it's held in there. I don't want the bottom to be shaking around when you shake the box. So I figured for actually laying out the octagon, we're going to lay it out on this piece of 1/4-inch poplar that I have, and this will give me an idea of how big the box would look like, and I can lay it out on there, shape it out, and put the saw on it and make sure it'll fit in there. Also, the bottom is going to be slightly smaller than the groove spacing, so as it has a tendency to expand and contract, it will be able to expand and contract in the grooves without busting the box apart. Then after actually figuring out the sizes, I originally had this cut to 3 inches, and I found I could cut it down to 2 1/4 inch, if I remember correctly. And so I can rip off that extra 3/4 inch and set that aside, because who knows when I need a 3/4 by something just over 1/4 inch. And we can do that to the other side, and now I have 2 matched boards that are about 2 1/4 inches tall by, well, about 3.5 foot long each. And because they are resawn, I have a matching grain on the inside that can then go all the way around the box, and so I'll have a grain flowing all the way around every corner of the box. We're going to start by squaring up an end, and then I can set my shooting board to the angle I need for an octagon. And it's got nice little marks on there. It says 8 sides, put it here, and it allows me to trim that up. And I get this perfect side on there, and then I can mark the first one to this length. And I don't really care exactly what that length is. I can make it a little bit bigger than I want it to be, because I can always make it smaller. And then once I have that first one done, then I can cut that one down and then trim its angle to match as well. Because I'm going to have 6 sides that are all identical, I want to make one of them that is my template, and I'm going to make all of them match that one. You'll also notice that ahead of time I went through and taped the pieces and numbered them. And this way I can make sure that I have a matching grain that flows around the box, so that 1 goes into 2, 2 goes into 3, and so on around the box. And I mark those before I make the cuts, so that once they're cut, they're all labeled out, and I know my grain will flow around it. After cutting all of the pieces, we can roughly lay it in place and make sure this is what I want. And at this point, I realized, I want to make it a little bit smaller. And so I come back and I take a few shavings off of each one and shape it out to exactly what I'm looking for. I can then lay this box on the bottom that I have and then trace around it on the inside of the box. And then I want to trace out just a little bit more. And so I have a 1/4 inch deep groove, and I only want to make it a little more than an 1/8 inch sticking into the groove. That gives me a little bit less than a 1/4 inch of movability for expansion and contraction, which is far more than this box will ever need for expansion and contraction. So once we have cut the bottom that will match in, we can then put a strap around the box and do a dry glue up, making sure it all fits in. And I'll put the strap on there, keeping it a little bit loose and making sure everything wiggles in. Then I found out, I made it a little bit tighter than I want to, so I'm actually going to chamfer the ends so that they wedge into place. And so the bottom of the box is actually slightly pillowed, and I'm going to do that on all sides until they pop into the groove nice and tight. So you can trim up, and you're just doing it at a very shallow angle to fit in there. And then I want that beveled angle towards the bottom of the box, or in this case, up. And it all pops into place. And now we do the dry glue up, the dry run. After doing it without glue, now we can do it with the glue. So we want to make sure everything's in place and works well before we put this strap down and clamp it up. I also want to make sure that my ratcheting head isn't right on a corner, so I'm not going to be dinging that up or messing it. And then before everything gets set aside to fully glue, we can tap it all down in place and make sure it's right where we want it. So let's set that aside, and for a little bit, let's actually work on the lid. And for this, I'm going to be using a Phiapino Mahogany. It's a really nice wood. It's soft and easy to work with, and it's a great beginner's wood because you still have to pay a lot of attention to the grain. The grain goes all over the place, but it's still a relatively easy wood to work with. I'm going to rip these boards down to 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch, and I'm going to then plane them, smooth them out, and get them really close to 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch. Now what I want is basically a 1/4 inch thick L that is 3/4 inch up and 3/4 inch over, and that will house on top of the box. And so I'll have a 1/4 inch lip hanging out over the edge of the box and a 1/4 inch lip hanging up. So that means I need to cut a rabbet into one corner of this that is 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. So I'm going to use my rabbet plane to come in and clean up one corner of that, and I'm setting it in my sticking board here. If you've never seen one of those, I have a video making it. This is actually a side rabbet cutter that I can come in and clean up the lines on there. And they weren't absolutely perfect. I wish I would have spent a little more time cleaning them up at this stage, but I was getting a little excited wanting to see this happen. So I'm going to do basically the exact same thing I did before with the bottom. I'm going to cut one of them as the pattern for the long side, and one of them as the pattern for the the 6 short sides, and then I can cut them all to match that initial pattern. And then I'm going to do a dry clamp up, make them in place, and this I can then take over to the box and make sure it fits down on there exactly what I'm looking for. In this case, I found out it's a lot more sloppy than I want. So we can take it all apart and take a few shavings off of every corner and then put it back together and try it again. And I went back and forth until I got exactly the right fit. I want it to slide down on there, but I want it to have just a little bit of catch so it can move around. But I also want to be able to rotate it so the lid can go on either way and still fit on there nicely. And then just like before, we're going to do the glue up, wrap it around, and put a strap on it, and then set this aside. And I do want to make sure that when I strap it on, I want to actually put it on top of the box so that the box will keep it in place. And that way I can make sure that it is holding it in its actual shape so it doesn't get bumped or jostled out of place. The nice thing about the Octagon is it tends to hold its place rather well. So once that's all dried up, we can take it off and do all of the finishing touches. I had a piece of glass cut to size, and I made a paper pattern of the inside, took it to my glass cutter and said, hey, I need one of these. And he gave that to me. So there is the rough edge of the box. You can see it's a little bit tight there, and I need to do a little bit of cleanup on that. So before we do any of the details on this, we want to actually smooth it up. And you can bring in a plane and just take some really fine shavings off of all of the sides, clean up all of the glue joints and any tear out or anything that's sticking into this, get it really close. We're going to do some final finishing, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but we want to make sure that the top edge and the bottom edge are nice and flat and smooth, and we've gotten any glue or any of the other issues that might be happening. You want to be careful when clamping it up. I mean, it is just a mitered joint glue up, and it's not quite the strongest glue up in the world. I had thought about putting splines in, but on an Octagon, the splines don't work quite as well, and there were a few other things. But after playing with the idea and actually trying out different methods, I just decided to leave just the butt glue joints to work well, and they do actually work well. For something like this, you would have to be doing some serious banging on it to make them have problems. But we're going to clamp them down in place, and to do the workup on it, you just want to make sure that you're clamping them well without running into other issues. One of these pieces I had planed down a different amount, and it was causing me problems. So I came in here with a bevel down chisel, and that allowed me to detail and clean it up. You can see I put another board across this and then put the holdfast on to lock that down in. Then we can also come in and clean up any of the glue squeeze out in the inside and then smooth out the outside. I found on this, rather than using a plane to do the majority of the smoothing, a file actually worked really well because they were very close, and I just wanted to do that final detail. Also ran a chamfer all the way around the top top and bottom edge of the lid as well as the top and bottom edge of the box itself. And then I made sure all of the joints met perfectly at the corners, and put a slight chamfer on the inside. And just doing this with a freehand chisel down worked pretty well. So we can put it together. I want to make a mark on the box and know where the carving can go, that the box won't cover it up. And I was looking for all sorts of different carvings online. I was thinking about a Celtic weave, but I wanted to do something with the Purpleheart, and I thought about putting the Purpleheart logo on there. But in the end, I found this this Celtic heart knot, and I really like this. It took a little bit of working to make it match and go all the way around, but with some stretching and expansion and cutting them and putting extra spaces in, it fit out really well. So we can start doing the carving on it. Now, this is one of those things that looks really intimidating, and oh no, freehand carving. Following a line like this is incredibly easy, and pretty much anyone can do this with 5 or 6 minutes of practice. It is surprisingly easy to do with just a V-tool and a small mallet, and you can get some really nice designs that to carve out pretty quickly. And it took me, I want to say about an hour to do this whole box, and with an hour's worth of work, it really just adds that much more detail to it and makes it very pleasing. You want to make sure you keep the tool sharp. Stop regularly and re-strop it. Don't ever let it get dull. Don't take it to the point where it has to go back and actually get sharpened. I just do with the strop, and that's all it needs. So then we can bring in the card scraper and scrape off the old pattern. There are a bunch of different ways of putting a pattern on. This is one of my favorites because I'm going to be coming back through here and cleaning it up anyways with the card scraper and getting my final smoothing on there. And so this it really isn't that big a deal to have to scrape this off, and it fits on there really nicely so it's not sliding around or coming off. There's a bunch of different ways of doing it with painter's tape and super glue and other ways, but I really like using a pattern just directly glued onto it. So now I need ways to hold this saw in place so it's not just sliding around inside the box. And I also need a small block that will hold the saw plate off of the bottom, and so that it's not bouncing around in there. So I cut a small plate that is the same thickness as the handle to the saw plate, and that will get glued in there. And I want to just clean that little block up. I'm going to add a little chamfer to it. Just make it look nice because it's going to be sticking inside. Next, we need to create some dowels, and these dowels will actually be stops inside that will hold the handle in 2 places and then hold the nose of the saw in 3 places so it's not sliding around and keeps it in the middle of the glass window. And I wanted to actually chamfer those up and make them look a little prettier, so I put a square chamfer on the top corner of each one. It's that little detail that actually kind of, I like it. I know it's not for everyone, but for me, I really like how that comes out. Now I need to drill holes that these will fit into in the bottom, and I want them to be nice and snug so they don't slide around. So we're going to drill a few test holes and make sure that they will fit in what I want. And this one was just about perfect. Really nice and tight and snugged down in there. Very pleasing with that. Now, at this point, I suddenly realized I made a mistake. I'm going to start drilling into the bottom here, and I just didn't even cross my brain that I might actually crack the bottom. And the lead screw is basically a wedge, and you can see there's a crack developing on that side. So, oops, yeah, I had to back that up. So thankfully, the pressure of the board was actually enough to close it back up, but I needed to pre-drill those and just go without them, or I should have gotten a twist bit that wouldn't have the lead screw in there to split it apart. But the other saving grace in this particular one is that we will be flocking the inside so that it's going to be completely covered up, so it's really not that big of an issue. And they will actually glue the pegs in place as well. Now, these were really close to the right thickness, but they were ever so slightly tight. And so I found that if I just rounded the dowel down just a hair, they fit in there perfectly, and I got this nice tight snug on there. And then we want to make sure that they are down below the top so that when the glass comes down, it doesn't hit these pegs. I want these to be below the surface. So we're going to push them in on the inside just a little bit more. On this one, I thought rather than planing the dowel, I was going to plane the inside, and I had a rat tail that was just the right size, and it allowed me to fill that in. So now I can come in with this, and I can mark off the thickness on the back, and then I can pull them out and then hit them with the saw and cut them exactly where they need to be so that they will go flush with the bottom. Because it's all put together ahead of time, it's one of those things that's hard to come back through and plane it. You can come through with a chisel and smooth it out, or sandpaper, but I wanted to make them pretty close to flush with the bottom. So now we can set this in here, and I can put 2 more in by the handle. And I'm just using the saw itself to set where the bit needs to be. And so on this one, I got smart, and I ran some pre-drilled holes so that I'm not going to be splitting it out, so that the screw isn't actually wedging the wood. It is running inside of a pre-drilled hole. So we can pre-drill those out, put in the pegs just like before, cut those to the right length so that they are flush on the bottom. And then we have all of the pegs in place that will theoretically hold the saw and stop it from moving around as the box moves. Now that everything is fitting the way I want it to, we want to make sure that everything is glued in place and all the final details are in there. Want to make sure that it's actually working, that the saw isn't going to be sliding around inside. Then that little block that goes underneath the plate, I'm going to chamfer all 4 of the corners and then chamfer the front edge corners. Having this tiny little block plane comes in well. Then we need to glue them in place, and I'm going to be using a little bit of sawdust and glue to fill any of those little cracks, making them disappear. But we're going to be flocking it anyways, so that actually will smooth it out. For the dowels, I'm actually just going to be using some super glue. It allows me to then fill the end pores of the dowel as well as then glue them into the box themselves. And for something small like this, super glue is perfectly fine. I'm going to use a small bit of super glue as well to hold this detail block in place that will lift it up off. And the nice thing about the flocking inside is I don't care too much about the actual detail of it, because it will hide any of those imperfections. And I know some people even come through and paint the inside to smooth it out before flocking it. I am going to hit everything with some 400 grit sandpaper. I know this is going to freak a lot of people out because I planed everything down as well, but I like hitting it with some sandpaper that will clog the pores, which will actually draw the oil in a little deeper, giving me more of that contrast between the rays and the grain of the wood. Especially with the white oak, it gives me more of that contrast I'm looking for. For the finish on this, I'm using boiled linseed oil and paste wax. I just like the way that comes out. And I'm going to put boiled linseed oil, let it soak up as much as it can. Then I'll put more on and let it soak up, and put more on and let it soak up until it's no longer soaking up anymore. And then I'm going to let it cure for a little while, and then come in and put in paste wax. I'm going to even do it on the inside here, more or less just to fill up all the pores and get it starting to solidify. Now, before I do the flocking on this, I want to make sure that everything is exactly the way it is. I'm going to do all my finish on here, and then I'm going to actually seal the inside with some shellac. And what that's going to do is it's going to further fill the pores, because once I put the paint on, it is going to it will absorb into the wood, and if it absorbs into the wood too fast, it actually dries too quickly, and then it doesn't have the stickum it needs to adhere to the flocking. So we're going to tape off everything, and the kit I have comes with the acrylic glue as well as the flocking to match. And we're going to slap this on there pretty thick. You want the glue, well, it is basically a glue. You want the paint to be very, very thick, but you want it to be smooth. You don't want to see any light spaces on there. So I'm going to coat the whole thing with one coat, and then I'm going to come back through with another coat and really smooth it out. And then once it's on there pretty well heavily, I'm going to come in with the flocking, and this allows me to spray it on there. And I'm going to put a lot of this on there. I want it to fill in as much of the space as possible, and then I can shake it around on the surface and make sure that it is touching all the surfaces. And then a few of them I see some bald spots, and so I actually came back through in those spots and touched them up just a little bit. So after the flocking fully cured, then we can pull off the tape, do a little bit of cleanup, the last little details on it. Then we can install the glass into the top, and to hold it in place, I was going back with a few things. Originally I was planning on just using a little bit of silicone to give it a soft top, but I've ended up deciding to use these glazing spikes. And for something soft like this, they actually go in really, really well, and I can use a pair of pliers to pull them in, and they hold the glass in place. And it just sits down on top. And just like that, we have a box. So let's put the saw in this and see how it looks. And yes, it all comes together very, very happy, and I like how this fits in there. Nice flocked edges, pops in place, and a glass top on it. I am really, really happy with how this came out, and I know someone out there is going to be very happy to own this.
Don't forget the
yes, it also comes with your very own maple syrup. All Rob Cosman's saws come with maple syrup in the box. I am in love with how this thing came out. Very, very pleasing, and I hope someone is very happy when they win it and help out the charity. So there you have it. I am in love with this. Now, if you want to see Rob Cosman, he has an entire video on making this exact saw. He made this one by himself for this particular cause. And we are going to be auctioning off the saw and the case. So if you would like to own this, you can do that. There is a link to the auction down below. It'll be available for 1 week, as well as a link to Rob's video making this saw. I'm in love with this, and I wish I could keep it myself, but this is one that is going to be going to one of you. So if you'd like to own it, go on down there and click on the auction. All proceeds are going to the Purpleheart project. And if you don't know what the Purpleheart project is, you got to take a look at that. I have a link to that down below as well. If you don't know what the Purpleheart project is, I have a link to it down below. It is a program started by Rob Cosman where he works with veterans, veterans who really need some serious help. And he brings them into the shop and teaches them hand tool woodworking, which sounds great. And it's a one-on-one whole week-long process where he works with Rob, teaching them what they need to do woodworking. And at the end of it, they're given a full set of tools as well as a bench. And there's a whole group of people who work together with the Purpleheart project to make the benches for these veterans. It is an incredibly cool program, and I've done a couple other auctions and things like that to raise for it. But this time, Rob and I are both getting together to do this. So if you'd like to own this, go down to the auction down below, and all proceeds of this go to the project. And if you do know of a veteran who is in need of something like this, then there is a form on Rob's site. I'll leave that down below as well. I love to see the art of woodworking being used to help veterans out in their time of need. If you want to find out anything about all that, links, lots of them down below. And if you have any other questions, thoughts, ideas, something I could have done better, something that would have made this even nicer, I do read through all the comments down below, and that really does help out the channel. Hitting like, comment, share, subscribing, that keeps us going and keeps us in front of more people. If you'd like to take it one more step farther, you can become a patron. All of the people scrolling on the side are patrons on Patreon, or you can click the little join button down below and become a member here on YouTube. We do have special perks for both patrons and members, and if you'd like to find out more about that, there's links to Patreon down below, or click the little join button and become a member. So I think that'll about do it for now, and until next time, have a wonderful day. You remember the old song about the purple people eater? Well, this case is now a purple saw eater.